After the soothsaying Springfieldians seemed to hit the nail on the head once again at the beginning of the year, folks' interest in predictions flared up big time. Somehow the writers behind the long-running animated comedy managed to pen events that resembled the storming of the Capitol and other assorted chaos. Scoring a futurology point like that so early in the year caused people to reevaluate other interesting events in the Simpsons history to see if 2021 had any other predetermined hijinks on the way. So let's take a look at the top 10 Simpsons predictions that could still happen in 2021. Coming in at number 10, we've got the glass dome. There are a whole bunch of different reasons that we could all find ourselves living beneath the protective cover of an enormous transparent fishbowl. In the feature-length Simpsons movie, we learned of a pig-based environmental disaster that prompted the head of the EPA to close off everything. Sure, it could have been anything, seeing as the solution was randomly chosen, but that's what they landed on. I can't imagine that the real-world decision-making process is much more refined, to be honest. Now, we haven't heard any whispers of glass doming any major cities yet, but don't write it off. There are 1,000,001 reasons that the powers that be could decide it's time to use the new dome-making technology to quarantine a city. If anything, preventing the spread of COVID could be used as the reason to totally shut off a place from the rest of the world. If a variant manages to be quicker and stronger than the other virus versions and folks decide they don't want to comply with a stay-at-home order, the glass globe could be called in. We could also see an environmental issue potentially prove too dangerous to ignore, just like in Springfield in the movie. Or maybe a zombie outbreak will begin and the good folks on the outside will decide that they're okay with the losses inside the dome. Anything to prevent a worldwide zombie apocalypse, right? It seems a little crazy, sure, but the moment you declare that no glass dome will ever be dropped upon your head is the moment that it actually happens. Don't tempt fate. Coming in at number 9, we've got the 4 Horsemen. Well, 3 in a wild card. Last November, The Simpsons aired their latest in a long line of Treehouse of Horror episodes. The classic Halloween tradition tends to lampoon some kind of popular horror IP while also poking fun at recent events. This time, they predicted the end of the world along with some bits concerning voting, both with similar results, of course. But the end of the world is preceded by the classic symbol of the end times, 4 horsemen, except this time there's a new guy riding along. We see war, we see pestilence, we see famine, all flying tattered banners above skeletal riders. And we also see Treehouse of Horror 31. Well, so far we've seen one of those, right? Although the current American administration seems intent on stirring the pot by calling out foreign leaders and ordering drone strikes, so war could still be on the table. Pestilence is actually here too, with COVID still impacting people's lives throughout North America and beyond. And famine is generally an issue, even though food scarcity has been supposedly solved. Anyone else see those dumpsters full of edible food get guarded by armed police? I don't know, folks, it's looking like all these horsemen might have come through after all, and if they didn't, they might be here soon. Coming in at number 8, President Harris. A few eagle-eyed viewers noticed a few similarities between the outfits of Vice President Kamala Harris and Lisa Simpson. In an episode that aired back in 2000, the show looks forward to a prospective future. Lisa ends up being President of the United States and is seen in the Oval Office going over the country's finances. Funnily enough, she even mentions that they inherited quite the budget crunch from President Trump. She's wearing a purple suit and a pair of pearl earrings with a necklace, too. Flash forward 21 years and we see Kamala Harris wearing an almost identical outfit on Inauguration Day. She might not be president, but she's close. And the fact that both purple-wearing politicians came into power immediately after Trump left office makes one think there could be something to this. Could Kamala end up in charge? The Simpsons seem to say yes. Coming in at number 7, Mars colonization. The space travel pipe dream. We've been imagining what this might be like for so long that if it actually happens, we might not actually know what to do. The Simpsons took a swing at life beyond our current limits in an episode where Lisa decides she's gonna head to Mars with the help of Exploration Incorporated. Marge and the rest of the family decide to tag along, with the initial touchdown on the Red Planet estimated to be somewhere in 2026. However, they don't make it in time, and when they do eventually arrive, Lisa announces that she might be thinking about Venus now. There are a few folks who seem to be planning on bringing us to Mars in the near future. Maybe not in 2021, but who knows? SpaceX has all sorts of Mars missions in mind, with cargo flights potentially lifting off next year. But will we have humans on the surface of Mars in 2021? Not likely. Coming in at number 6, we've got an environmental meltdown. We talked about the glass dome a little earlier, but that was a reaction to another prediction the Simpsons might have made. In that very same movie, Homer gets a pet pig and stores all of the pig's droppings in a massive silo. Instead of disposing of them responsibly, the donut-mucking family man decides to pump the sewage into a nearby lake, causing a catastrophic environmental disaster. This is what eventually inspires the government to drop a dome on the town. Most folks take a look at Homer Simpson and think that he's an exaggerated caricature, but the thing is, there are people who are actually that irresponsible in the real world. So I don't think it's an extreme long shot for us to predict a massive meltdown from a similarly bad decision. You know, maybe it'll be a ship of hazardous material that accidentally unloads into a body of water. We've already seen the Suez Canal plugged up by a container-laden ship. I'm sure that'll have some long-standing economic effects as well as some environmental ones. Coming in at number 5, Ivanka for PREZ. Here's a quick and potentially likely one. We see a button on Homer that says Ivanka 2028. Donald Trump promised a return to the political arena when he gets his chance, but it also seems that his family is tossing their hats into the ring. Maybe not for president, but definitely for right-wing influencer. Don Jr. and Eric seem to be doing their best to remain relevant in the right-wing online community, and folks have touted Ivanka as a sensible pick for politics for a while. We won't be able to see if this one is true for a little while, but keep an eye out for political opportunism over the next little while. Coming in at number 4, musical brainwashing. To be fair, this one could already be happening, and we wouldn't know until like 20 years from now. There's an episode where Bart and pals end up as members of a successful boy band, which turns out to be a part of a major Navy psyop. Their big hit? A song called Drop Da Bomb. Subtle. But with the military bankrolling Marvel flicks and major corporations acting like human beings on social media to convince people that they're relatable, would it really be all that surprising if a bunch of big hits these days were sending subliminal messages meant to control behavior? Coming in at number 3, Hollow Mail. We're close to this one, and to be honest, I can't see something like this taking off now that we've got video-enabled smartphones. But having the ability to send holographic messages via the mail like a goofy little Star Wars facsimile would be pretty fun, but it probably wouldn't be too cheap. And I doubt someone looking for a band for a show would bother to use one of these and contact new musicians like what happened to The Simpsons. Coming in at number 2, HOVERCARS. Speaking of technology pipe dreams, we've been waiting for HOVERCARS for ages. Remember when shows and movies depicting 2021 would have just about guaranteed that we'd have flying vehicles and self-lacing shoes by now? One of those things is probably easier and safer to implement than the other, but still. A 2005 episode of The Simpsons showed Homer and Lisa riding around in an admittedly shaky prototype, but achieve liftoff and stay in the air long enough to get them to their destination. Cars have improved considerably over the years, but we're still nowhere near consumer-grade hovercars. Who knows though? And finally at number 1, sponsored schooling. And not sponsored by an education board or anything like that, I'm talking about products taking over the education of our young minds. In a gag that might seem a little too real today, we see an aging Troy McClure lecturing an overstuffed classroom via telecommunication. Math is sponsored by Pepsi, and he wants to know how refreshed everyone is instead of an integer answer, and even gives partial credit for an answer in the form of the brand name. We're close, we're getting there. Soon, the Amazon Lifetime Fulfillment course presented by Zoom and Microsoft will be projected into homes across the world. With education budgets getting slashed left and right, it wouldn't be surprising if schools as we know it shifted entirely digital. And once we're there, it's super easy for brands to slip in. Good luck, kids. Our favorite Springfieldian family has always seemed to have a knack for predicting the future. When you make that much television, you're bound to write something that happens in real life somewhere down the road. Art imitates life, and in turn, life imitates art. Some folks might call this predictive programming, or maybe claim that it's an insidious plot to keep us complacent in the changes happening around us. I call it a bunch of TV writers doing their best to come up with wacky scenarios every week. Potato, potato, I guess. For whatever reason, folks really jumped on the latest wave of Simpson prediction conspiracy theories, and with that, lots of wild stuff has been linked to the show. Whether you believe it all or simply think that it's a coincidence, there's no denying the appeal of looking to a popular cartoon for a potential glimpse into humanity's future. We've seen all sorts of predictions seemingly come true over the past few years, and folks are flabbergasted by the idea that the folks at Fox were ready for so long. Take the recent Kamala Harris-Lisa Simpson connection. The purple suit caused a whole lot of synapses to fire across the internet, and I don't think some folks will ever stop talking about it. And if we delve back even deeper into presidential conspiracies, what about that time The Simpsons predicted the Trump presidency? Sure, it was played for a gag, but somehow this television businessman made his way into the White House. So for all of the predictions they've made, including the apocalypse, so-called, on Inauguration Day, some are still outstanding. They can't get them all right after all, but there are a few that really do feel like they could be accomplished in the next little while, whether they're technological advances, insane political maneuvers, or wild twists of fate that will affect vast swaths of people. So let's get right into the predictions that might come true in 2022. Are we really already 3/4 through 2021? Time sure does fly when you spend all of it on the internet. Godspeed. So the first prediction I want to analyze today is from the episode titled Lisa's Wedding, where the writers quite literally take a look into their characters' futures. The Simpsons family is thrust forward a couple dozen years, and we get to see them all grown up. Marge and Homer are looking significantly older, and Bart, Lisa, and Maggie are now full-grown adults at this point. And of course, as the title suggests, Lisa is getting married, to a Brit no less. The family takes a trip to England to meet their new in-laws-to-be, and during their stay they encounter all sorts of wacky predictions concerning what the future might look like. One of the most iconic and oft-referenced things from this future London is Big Ben, the famous clock tower striking out the hours for all to hear. Back before personal timepieces were commonplace, many people had to rely on things like clock towers to even know what time it was. We've really changed things up since then, as time is more important than ever when it comes to running businesses that are reliant on international cooperation and digital platforms. With this in mind, you can turn your attention to the newly digitized Big Ben, sporting a clock face that looks like it belongs on a Casio. It does away with a lot of the analog charm and history associated with the tower, doesn't it? But it's more efficient, so why not make the jump? Then you can have everyone sync up their personal clocks to Big Ben via Wi-Fi, and nobody can be late for anything ever again unless you want to try and make an excuse that works around this newly efficient system. Of course, it's doubtful that Big Ben will ever be fully made digital. There's too much history there, too much tourism potential. However, with the way things are going right now, digital seems to be rapidly overtaking analog in all sorts of ways. More people rely on digital, centralized clocks to plan their lives, whether that means using a phone clock or the one on their laptop. Watches have largely become accessories or jewelry, unless they can be used for step counting or connecting to the internet. I haven't been in a classroom for a while, so I can't really tell you the last time I saw a proper wall clock. Billboards are opting to become enormous LCD screens to maximize the amount of ads they can display. All of this to keep things connected and seemingly integrated. So what's to say some hotshot in tech wouldn't suggest that Big Ben be brought into the age of information? As we speak, Big Ben is undergoing some renovations too. That's right, in 2017 the bells were silenced, the dials were scheduled to be reglazed, lighting was set to be upgraded, and a lift was even planned to be added. No public announcements about digitizing the display, but nothing is certain, right? And guess when this upgrade is due to be finished? 2022. There's still the possibility that Big Ben could be shaped into the form we witnessed on the Simpsons quasi-canonical foray into the future. Speaking of technology run rampant, let's move on to the next possible prediction. We've seen a lot of wonderful advances in tech over the past few decades, bringing us levels of luxury and efficiency we could previously only dream of. Of course, this kind of advancement is a double-edged sword, with every benefit bringing along some sort of damage or detriment. The more nice things we have, the more garbage we produce. The more comfortable our homes and workplaces are thanks to air conditioning and fuel-powered energy, the more damage we could do to the environment. Plenty of greener options are available for consumers and businesses alike, but the profit motive of using the cheaper, dirtier methods remains. With the way things are going, we could very well end up with a bit of an environmental disaster on our hands. It's slowly working up to Armageddon right now, with many irreversible milestones about to be reached, but that kind of slow march towards doom is easy to ignore. If someone were to, say, dump a large amount of hazardous waste into the water supply, or set off some sort of reaction that burns up enormous tracts of land, then we'd have to do something. Folks have tried fighting the fires set by gender reveal parties and in the ocean, and done their best to clean up oil spills, but it's tough. Wouldn't it be easier if we just contained the disaster so the rest of the world could breathe easy? Well, The Simpsons predicted just such an event occurring and came up with an ingenious solution. Put a dome over it. You might remember this from the Simpsons movie way back when. After Homer dumps all of his pet pig's droppings into a local waterway, things get bad fast. Thus, a wonderful, benevolent government official decides that the best option is to totally quarantine that area in the most literal way possible. Dome. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened next year, to be completely honest. All it takes is one dude stockpiling crude oil in Rubbermaid containers, dumping his stash into the river. Or maybe an NFT farm will catch fire so spectacularly no one can hope to put it out. And to cap off our predictions for the day, why not go with the classic billionaire blocks out the sun bit. Stranger things have and will continue to happen. In the episode Who Shot Mr. Burns, the titular nuclear power plant owner decides that he would make a whole lot more money if no one could experience the sun's rays. To ensure that his nuclear-powered electricity was sold as a monopoly, he erects an enormous device meant to literally block out the sun, plunging Springfield into darkness. Although I don't think anybody today would be able to pull this off for political, technological, and general moral reasons, we have seen major corporations do their best to keep monopolies thriving so that customers pay out the nose for something they could otherwise get for next to nothing. Nestle diverting water, bottling it, and selling it back to people at a profit seems to be about equivalent, doesn't it? Well, going back to literally blocking out the sun, I again don't think someone will put a machine on Earth to do it. I can see this going one of two ways. Option 1, we continue to wreck the environment and produce massive amounts of waste and fumes. Eventually, smog and smoke manage to semi-permanently settle in our atmosphere, stopping the full rays of the sun from ever reaching the surface. Sounds like fun. Option 2 involves all these billionaires continuing their personal space race to the point where satellites orbiting Earth are simply too plentiful. We'll start seeing the blanket of machines from the surface, and soon enough they'll cross over the sun like clouds on an overcast day. It might not be intentional on the surface anywhere, but if this happens, a billionaire will have blocked out the sun. The future, everyone. So that just about sums up the Simpsons predictions I could see happening in the far off year of 2022. History seems to be moving faster than ever these days, although I think that does have something to do with the fact that we're always chronicling everything from every conceivable angle. Wild how that works, right? So what do you think of these predictions? Rooted in reality or some ridiculous sci-fi nonsense? Make sure you let me know down in the comments.
Did The Simpsons predict the 2024 president election? Yes. And you're never going to believe who they predicted winning it all. We're a week removed from the election, and although it seems evident that Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States, technically nothing is official, especially with President Trump challenging all the votes. Still, it seems the writing is on the wall, so now we're setting our sights to the 2024 election. And what better way to try and determine who is going to win the next election than going through old Simpsons episodes and looking for hints or clues which may or may not give us the answers we're looking for. To no surprise, it seems yet again the Simpsons have predicted the future decades before it even happened. Now, considering how we're 4 years out from the next election, there's no way to confirm nor deny if the prediction is all that accurate until it actually happens. That being said, as of this recording, if what the media is saying turns out to be true, well, the Simpsons will be incredibly spot on with their prediction. Welcome back to LBQ, guys. Make sure you guys smash that like button, it really helps the channel out. But for now, we gotta get to the bottom of this one, so let's get right back into it. On March 19th, the year 2000, the episode Bart to the Future aired on Fox. It was the 17th episode of the 11th season of the show, and it's one of the episodes that, following Trump's bid for presidency, started to get a lot of attention. In the episode, a comment is made claiming that former President Trump caused a budget crisis that Lisa, the new president of the country, needs to deal with. Of course, this episode is one of the many that led to people claiming Simpsons writers are from the future, but it turns out the episode was created the same year Trump ran for president as an independent party. One of the show's writers, Dan Greeny, told The Hollywood Reporter, I quote, "It was a warning to America, and that just seemed like the logical last step before hitting rock bottom. It was pitched because it was consistent with the vision of America going insane." No one could have predicted that 16 years later, Trump would not only run, but would actually win the bid for presidential candidate with the Republican Party. Beyond that, no one thought he was actually going to win. Yet 4 years later, and here we are with Trump challenging the current vote count in hopes of staying in office for a second consecutive term. So how does The Simpsons come into play with all of this? Well, it seems evident that they somehow, someway knew Trump was going to be running for president in 2024 and will actually end up winning. The episode doesn't show him winning the election, but there is a very specific line that alludes to the fact that President Trump does win the election in 2024. The episode Bart to the Future takes place in the year 2030, and given that Lisa is president, that would mean that she won the election in 2028. As Bart is visiting his sister in the White House, you could overhear her talking with her associates as she says, I quote, "As you know, we've inherited quite the budget crunch from President Trump." Given that Lisa would have won in 2028 and is talking about the budget crunch she inherited from the previous president in Trump, that would mean that he won the 2024 election and left Lisa with a crumbling economy. I know it probably sounds absolutely insane, but when you do the math and really break it down, it seems once again the Simpsons have predicted the future decades before it even happened. Now, this prediction is yet to be determined, as we need to wait and see how things play out. As of now, if Trump were to officially concede and accept his loss in the election, he'd be able to run again in 2024, and given the fact that he has experience, which he didn't have prior to his first election, his chances of winning would likely be much higher. The show didn't predict who he would be running against, nor which party he'd be running for, but odds are if the past and present are any indication of the future, the man would remain Republican. So how likely is it that Trump actually does run for president in the 2024 election? Again, assuming he does officially lose to unofficial President-elect Joe Biden, it seems more likely than not. Multiple media outlets have reported that Donald Trump is already discussing a campaign for the 2024 election, a sign that he not only realizes but has accepted defeat. Although he's yet to outright do so, at least publicly, sources close to the current president are claiming he's seriously considering another run, especially given the fact that he feels the election is quite quite literally being stolen from him due to fraudulent voting. However, another very interesting point that needs to be highlighted is that The Simpsons appeared to not only predict the 2024 election, but also predicted the 2020 election. More specifically, users took to Twitter, sharing an image of the Electoral College from a previous Simpsons episode, comparing it to the one from our most recent election. At first glance, the cartoons version, which is from an episode that aired in 2012, seems almost identical to the current Electoral College outcome. It seems the only state which the show got wrong was Arizona, which they had red instead of blue. All the other states appeared to be identical to how things played out in the most recent election. But upon further examination, it seems the show got a few of the states wrong. Ohio and Virginia were red states in the election. However, they appear to be blue in the show. Still, considering how they got almost all the Electoral College votes right, at least the majority vote, it is incredibly impressive. And to no surprise, people on Twitter were freaking out, with one person even asking The Simpsons to predict the rest of their life. Going back to Trump and the 2024 election, assuming that he does concede sooner than later, and congratulates Biden on his victory, I wouldn't be all that surprised if Donald Trump eyes a return to the White House in the next election. Given how his administration is pushing for recounts in numerous states, and are under the impression that the election is being stolen from them, to no surprise, they'll want to redeem themselves any way possible. It's also important to note that Trump and Biden received more votes in a presidential election than any other candidate. Although Biden holds the record with the most votes, both men broke the previous record, with Trump clocking in just under 71.5 million votes, and Biden receiving over 76 million. And as crazy as it seems for Trump to run again, given the support he received from the American people, it seems quite evident that the Republican Party would be more than willing to nominate him to lead their party once again. And aside from getting the confidence of the American people, the Republican Party may see Trump as their only option to win, especially considering the fact that potential 2024 GOP candidates have been quiet regarding the fraudulent voting claims currently being argued. Taking to Twitter, Donald Trump Jr. tweeted out, "The total lack of action from virtually all of the 2024 GOP hopefuls is pretty amazing. They have a perfect platform to show that they're willing and able to fight, but they will cower to the media mob instead. Don't worry, at real Donald Trump will fight and they could watch as usual." Brad Parscale, Trump's former campaign manager, also chimed in regarding the fraud election drama, tweeting out, I quote, "If you want to win in 2024 as a Republican, I would probably start saying something, just saying." Clearly, if the American people feel the same way, or at the very least feel that Trump is one of the few politicians that are willing to stick it to the man, if you will, while other Republicans cower, then his chances of winning increase tenfold. This would also affect the likelihood of the Republican Party having faith in another candidate beating the Democratic nominee, especially in assuming it's either Biden or his VP Kamala Harris running for re-election. To put it in simple terms, regardless of what the Republican Party thinks, if the American people are under the impression that Trump is fighting a fraudulent vote system, while his peers in the Republican Party, who are potentially eyeing a 2024 nomination, sit back and don't fight with him, they likely won't have much confidence in said potential nominees running the country. This would just give Trump's chances of a 2024 bid to become even more likely. And quite recently, Trump's former White House Chief of Staff, Mickey Mulvaney, said, "I would absolutely expect the president to stay involved in politics and would absolutely put him on the short list of people who are likely to run in 2024. Now, I know Mick isn't a writer for The Simpsons, so we can't take what he said as the absolute truth, but odds are the man knows more than the average person, so I think it's safe to say all signs are pointing to Trump running again for president in 2024. So to wrap things up, did The Simpsons predict the 2024 president election? Yes, they did. Of course, we're gonna have to wait 4 years to determine if that prediction even comes true. But a good indication will come around 2022 when people will start to gear up for the next election. If President Trump does concede and goes on to run for president again in 2024, we may need to start looking at every episode of The Simpsons in hopes of planning better for the future. Until then though, let's continue just enjoying it for the great comedy it provides us on a weekly basis.
Did The Simpsons predict the first female president? Well, I think they might have, but the answer has a lot of twists and turns to consider. And that is what I'm going to be breaking down for you guys in today's video. I'm Mackenzie, you're watching Life's Biggest Questions, and let's just get right into it. So as you all know if you watch the channel, it's abundantly clear that The Simpsons predicted President Trump winning the presidency in 2016. And there's tons of evidence to prove this. But with the 2020 election being officially decided in the favor of Biden, barring any legal traction from President Trump in states he's fighting fraud in, people are now wondering if The Simpsons predicted the 2020 win as well. And if you follow one train of thought, The Simpsons may have predicted the win, as well as America's first female president. So to take it back a little bit for some context, from the start of the election, emphasis has been on the declining health of both of the presidential nominees, Trump and Biden. But since Biden is older and there has been various recordings of him not really making sense at times, many people have said that a vote for Biden may in fact just be a premature vote for his VP, as it's a possibility that Biden not be able to finish out a full term if he were to win, and the VP might have to take over. Well, if you believe The Simpsons, this prediction might be coming true. One of the most important clues that The Simpsons has given us about the first female president is the fact that in the show, Lisa becomes the first president after she takes over for President Trump, with future Lisa saying in the episode, quote, "As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump," telling her staff in the Oval Office. And the writer of the show, Dan Greeny, said that he wrote Lisa coming in straight after Trump on purpose, saying to The Hollywood Reporter, quote, "The important thing is that Lisa comes into the presidency when America is on the ropes. And that is the condition left by the Trump presidency. What we needed was for Lisa to have problems that were beyond her fixing, that everything went as bad as it possibly could, and that's why we had Trump be the president before her." So I guess if you think America's at its rock bottom currently because of Trump, the Simpsons writers feel that way too. And for more of a summary on the episode in question, called Bart to the Future, that aired in March 19th of 2000, it starts with Bart going through a rough patch and looking into the future where he ends up being a complete loser, and Lisa is president, with Lisa declaring while in the Oval Office, quote, "I am the first straight female president of the United States," when she's 38 years old. And after Lisa achieves this honor, her family quickly follows, and they all move into the White House too. And as you could expect, the family's antics wreak havoc on her political activities. Bart also disrupts one of Lisa's addresses to the nation to promote his music career, which leads Lisa to be branded unpopular when Bart sings that Lisa will be raising taxes to get the country out of debt, which then leads other nations to demand to be paid back the money that they gave the states. But Bart ends up saving the day by stalling the debt collectors and saying that the money will be paid back soon. And if you put all those pieces together, it seems that the prediction here is that after Trump loses in 2020, Biden might come into office for a short time, but he won't be able to fulfill his duties for the full 4 years, so the presidential responsibilities will fall to his current VP, Kamala Harris, which would make her the first female president ever. Another theory about The Simpsons that some are talking about dives deeper into Lisa Simpson's name. Since Lisa is short for Elizabeth, people think that the first female president could be Elizabeth Warren. Obviously, this wouldn't be happening straight after Trump has left office, but it is something that definitely could happen in the near future, considering that Warren looked to be a favorite in the race for the Democratic nominee, and she was the last woman standing in the race. And something else that The Simpsons are predicting is a potential Ivanka Trump presidential race in 2028. And if you think about it, since the Trump family is now so invested into politics, it would make a lot of sense that one of his kids would give it a shot. And considering that Ivanka is the most well-liked, at least I would say that she probably is, she makes the most logical sense. But in the show, it was a very subtle suggestion. At one point in a 2016 episode, Homer wore an Ivanka 2028 campaign button. But the Simpsons have not stopped there with their predictions for Ivanka. And in a 2017 episode, it showed Ivanka marking her father's 100th day in office by her replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court, while modeling a robe and earrings from her collection that could be bought for 1,000 rubles. And since we know that RBG sadly passed away during Trump's term, that prediction was sort of half right. And I think it's definitely possible that a Trump child will make a run in the future, and 2028 does seem like a perfect time, honestly. And for the Supreme Court, that's obviously a long shot, but if 2020 has showed us anything, it's that really anything is possible. And another kinda sorta way that they predicted the election was in a recent episode that aired in November of 2020, with the main theme of that episode being that if people don't vote, then Trump will definitely win again, and mobilizing people in 2020 is what was needed for a Biden-Harris win. For a summary of that episode, it started with Springfield voters in massive lines to vote for the election. Homer's at home, too lazy to vote, but then Marge urges him to vote, saying, quote, his vote for president has never been more important. Then Homer heads to vote, still unsure of who to vote for. Lisa then shows up, and Homer then asks if it's possible to vote for Judge Judy. But then Lisa snapped at him for still being undecided after having President Trump for 4 years. Homer then looks back at the last 4 years as he shudders at the thought of everything Trump has done. And obviously it's clear that the Simpsons are incredibly biased against Trump's policies. Then Homer snaps out of it, determined to make a change and votes. Viewers were convinced that Homer voted for Trump's rival and Democratic candidate Joe Biden, as he turned to the camera and said, quote, who are you going to make fun of now, late night comics? Which is actually very valid. Like, what did late night hosts talk about before Trump? Honestly, like, they still might keep talking about him when he leaves office at this rate, because what else is there to talk about? It's like Trump or coronavirus on the news. But we learn at the end of the episode that the whole thing was just a dream, because Homer didn't actually vote. But the craziest part is that Homer's vote ended up being the deciding vote of the election. It then cuts to the inauguration day when Trump is reelected, and the world has gone into chaos because Homer did not vote. Which the Simpsons said point blank is to put fear into people so that they do vote. And because of a number of factors, the 2020 election had the highest voter turnout of all time, with both Trump and Biden breaking the record for the most votes ever cast. But of course, since Biden won the popular vote, he was declared winning the most votes in history, with him having close to 80 million votes as of now. This could all mean that messages like this about the election being pivotal is what made people decide to get out and vote in record numbers in this election. But I'm also sure that mail-in voting definitely made it possible for more people than ever to vote as well. So that's all for my prediction as of now. What do you guys think? Do you agree with my train of thought on Kamala potentially becoming the first female president, or do you think it could end up becoming Elizabeth Warren in the future instead? Let me know below.
If you don't know that The Simpsons has some ability to see into the future, then you've not been in tune with what is going on. Who knows what is going on behind the scenes with this show? It might be run by some sort of Time Lord from the future who wants to give us hints about what is going to happen through a very popular TV show, or maybe there's a rift in time and space that is in The Simpsons writing office and it taps into the writers' minds without them knowing. So their ideas for the show are actually coming from the future, and we are unknowingly watching visions of the future on a scripted show that kind of lost its luster 10 years ago, but still sticks around as some good comfort food. Or maybe if you have a show running for almost 30 years, you touch on so many topics that it is impossible not to predict the future. You literally write about every outcome of the future, so eventually one of them has to be true. If we look at all the predictions, maybe their success rate isn't that high. No matter what the reasoning is, we are going to find out the answer. I'm your host, Jade Reyna, and on today's Life's Biggest Questions, we are going to be asking the question, who is behind The Simpsons predicting the future? Okay, let's start off by explaining what this is all about. The Simpsons has a knack for making episodes that are eerily close to things that happen way after the episodes air. Here are a few examples. In episode 2 of season 9, we saw an image of the beautiful statue of David with pants on, which seems very bonkers. Why would anyone think it's a good idea to deface art with a pair of Levi's? Well, in the middle of St. Petersburg stood a mimic of the statue of David, and for an unknown reason, people voted on whether or not the statue should be wearing clothes or not. I guess they didn't want little kids to see David's little wiener. It's art, people. A penis can't hurt you. In 1993, there was an episode where the Simpsons version of the Las Vegas performance Siegfried and Roy were attacked by their gorgeous tiger. Then, of course, there was the devastating event in 2003 when Roy was attacked by the tiger that they performed with for years. Now, guessing that a massive tiger would one day attack its owner isn't a long stretch, and it's a joke that people had been making for a very long time. But there was even an episode where they looked into the future, and Lisa Simpson was president, and the former president was Donald Trump, and this episode came out 16 years before Trump was ever elected. There has to be something in the water over there at Simpsons HQ. We should get all of those guys to stop writing an animated sitcom and get them to start working as precogs like a Minority Report. I want to know what crime is going to happen before it happens. Also, if you could get them to tell me what the next flavor of Krispy Kreme donut is going to be, that would be great. Stopping crime comes first, but knowing what the next delicious treat is comes a close second. But if we're really going to get into it, I mean, if you guys want me to give you the most blunt and obvious answer, then it comes down to math. There's no secret group of all-knowing wizards that have decided to work as Simpson writers. How many episodes of The Simpsons has there been? At the time of this recording, there has been 673. That is a ton of content. Any writer would dream of creating a show that has that kind of legs. Now, when you're writing a show, even though each episode will have a main storyline, there is usually a B and C plot, and sometimes even a D plot, depending on how deep the episode will go. Now, The Simpsons is a show that is constantly doing social commentary, and episodes air a year after they are written. They need to think about what the global climate might look like a year into the future. And with at least 3 plots every episode, that is 2019 guesses at the future. And the number might be even higher if we include all the D plots. So when you get some of the greatest writing minds together in a room, some from Harvard and other prestigious colleges, you ask them about the future, and they get 2019 guesses at what might happen. If they were to get 20 to 30 right, that's actually not that impressive. Think about it in any other context. If you were doing sports predictions and you were guessing about which teams would win which games, and you got 25 right out of 2,000 games, you would probably be fired. So in the end, it's just a numbers game, nothing less, nothing more. I know some of you out there are thinking, no way, man, they tapped into something, I just know it. Well, you can keep believing that, I'm not going to stop you. But with all this being said, it doesn't take away from how amazing the show is. The Simpsons, even though it hasn't been held in the highest regard in the most recent years, has been the voice of a generation and the centerpiece of some of the best television ever made. I'm part of the crew that argues the first 10 seasons can stand up to any show ever and will be looked back on as some of the best television in history. So having the ability to predict the future or not doesn't really matter. Well, that is the logical answer at least, but over here at Life's Biggest Question, we like to speculate on things that are a little bit crazier. So let's say it wasn't all math. What if there was something deeper going on? Well, here are some of my favorite conspiracy theories as to why the show is able to have the ability of true sight. First being that the show has an amazing cast of writers. Some people like Al Jean, Mike Reiss, and Conan O'Brien. Many of these guys attended Ivy League schools, and people always connect Ivy League schools with the Illuminati, the Freemasons, and many other secret rich people organizations. So some people think that The Simpsons is a tool that rich people use to communicate to each other and the shadow government. You put an episode about the NSA listening to people through their phones. You can't tell people over the phone, obviously, because they would be listening to you through the phone. Then all your global elite buddies know not to use their phones, and you can keep gathering information in the shadows. A communication tool for the rich and powerful is a fun idea, but I don't think it would be a very useful one. It takes a long time for episodes to be written, scripted, animated, and edited. I don't think it would be very useful for the most powerful and evil people in the world to get their information out that way. Honestly, I think it would just be better to have everyone on a mailing list or have a group meeting or something like that. I don't know, just anything would be better. That brings me to my second conspiracy theory, that the show is run by aliens who want to control us. This theory suggests that the show isn't so much The Simpsons predicting the future, but that they are creating it. Through the influence of a very popular show, they can get into the heads of millions of people and get them to do their bidding, influencing what they want the future to look like and making it into a reality through the very people who watch the show. Dum dum dum. This theory goes hand in hand with all those other predictions that the government is secretly run by a race of lizard people. Or maybe it would be more similar to the Kang and Kodo characters that we have seen on the show, with one massive eye and perpetual drool. And we can get into some Simpsons conspiracy inception with the episode Treehouse of Horror 7, where Kang and Kodo run for president. Could this be our alien overlords taunting us, or could this really just be a show? Well, it's just a show. I'm just exploring this madness for you because it's fun. And my final conspiracy theory on who's behind The Simpsons predicting the future is that the creator, Matt Groening, is a time traveler from the future. It would be easy to predict the future if you had already seen it all happen. And there is more backing this idea than the sole fact that the show has been able to predict the future a handful of times. If Matt Groening was from the future, he would know how to make the right moves to get the show on the air and turn it into a massive success. People who believe in this theory say that in his timeline there was a show very similar to The Simpsons, maybe even exactly the same, but it lacked something and then it was canceled and disappeared. Matt saw that the one piece that the show was missing was social commentary. He then took his information, went back in time, and made the most successful show of all time and became a millionaire. And he also looks like a genius because he is the brainchild behind a show that can see through space and time. I still believe the alien one a little bit more than this one. Well, I believe the math one more than all of them because it's the only logical answer, but this is life's biggest questions. We like to get weird.